This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every week, you know who it is. It's Robb Reinhold.
Hey everybody, this is Robb Reinhold from Maverick Currencies and Maverick Trading. We are a prop trading firm based in the U.S. We trade with a U.S. broker, Interactive Brokers. So look, I don't want to be touting U.S. too much. I know that could be a controversial subject for some people, but the great thing is we're domiciled here. Everything is regulated, licensed, stuff like that.
And we are continuing on with the Crazy Robb Brain Chemistry series, and the train rolls right along this week with cortisol. Now, Robb, I've heard of cortisol. If you asked me what it did, I couldn't tell you. So we're going to leave this one up to you. And can you give us kind of a general sense of what it is and, what part it plays, and then we can go a little deeper into it as we go along?
Well, geez, Patrick, you're putting this all on me. That's creating a lot of stress. All right, that was a little intro into cortisol, what's also known as the stress hormone. So let's talk about this. I'm going to say the same thing I did in the last episode. I am not a neuroscientist. I don't know anything. Look, I'm a trader. That's all I am. So I'm going to be pushing you out to other people. If you really want to learn more about cortisol, I'm not your guy. I'm your guy when it talks about how to handle cortisol in trading. But as far as how cortisol works, I'm going to push you off again to Andrew Huberman, specifically podcast 18. He talks a lot about it. That's where you want to go to really learn about what cortisol is and how it works. I'm going to give you a quick version of what cortisol is and how it works, and then we're really going to get into trading. Cortisol and trading, how does it affect us? Last week we talked about adrenaline. Adrenaline and cortisol go together. Now, cortisol is actually made from cholesterol. Now, cholesterol also produces things like testosterone and estrogen, and also cortisol. And the reason we have cortisol in our system, it helps us with our immune system, it regulates mood, and it helps us with memory. So a lot of the same things that adrenaline helped us out with, also cortisol is going to help us out with it as well. Basically, it's going to do something similar to adrenaline when we trigger that fight or flight response. We talked about this last week. That fight or flight response, something intense happens, and our body has to get ready for action. And that's what cortisol and adrenaline are all about action. Now, adrenaline basically got you ready for fight. Cortisol, I don't want to say puts you in the category of flight, but it does a lot of the things that might be a little bit opposite of what adrenaline does. So it also does produce more glucose in the blood, so you have more energy. But its big thing it does, it curbs functions that are going to be non-essential or harmful in the fight or flight situation. For example, it shuts down your appetite. It shuts down your digestive tract. Basically, what it's doing is it's saying, hey, we don't need to spend energy on this right now. We are in fight or flight. We don't need to be worrying about eating right now. We need to be worrying about taking action. So it will actually shut down those systems. It will shut down your immune system during fight or flight responses. So it will go through and actually shut down a lot of the processes that the body depends on for survival. Now, in short term, that's a good thing. Long term, you can see how that's a bad thing. And I want to ask you this question to both you, Patrick, and to our listeners. Just think about when you are in that fight or flight response, are you ever thinking, should I have a pizza or a sandwich tonight? Patrick, when you've been in that fight or flight response, do you think about anything outside of that moment?
No, not at all. And I mean, that's got to be instinct taking over, right? I mean, all that matters is what's going on in that situation, because, if I don't play this right, then there might not be an opportunity to have a pizza or a sandwich later. So I think that's probably how my brain and how thousands of years of survival instincts probably played in, I'd imagine.
Of course. I'm sure you can remember in those early years when you put yourself in these fight or flight situations in trading, you didn't stop and go to the kitchen to get some food. That was the last thing on your mind.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was trading intraday. I had my charts all the way zoomed in, so all I could see was crazy amounts of movement, and you have to be right there. I mean, a lot of times I would have to pee, and I didn't even get up for that because I was like, who knows what I'm going to miss out on if I leave my screen? Am I going to be able to take profit when I want? Am I going to be able to stop a trade that's losing really badly? I didn't have any systems in place. It was all me. So there was a lot of that going on early on. Way too much of it, if I'm being honest.
That is so true. Have you ever had better bladder control than when you were in a serious trade and you had to go pee?
I was amazed I even had that level of bladder control. Yeah, sometimes it gets out of hand, but you got this money on the line, so yeah.
Well, that's cortisol. That's cortisol doing its things. Hey, look, we don't need to worry about this right now. And so it actually puts those systems on hold. And that's the big problem with cortisol when it comes to trading. Because this is essential in fight or flight, but it's not good for us long term. And I want to talk about chronic stress. And this is what we've heard all the stuff about cortisol, a lot of the negative stuff, is that when you have too much cortisol in your body, not just too much, but over too long of a period of time, remember, it's shutting down those systems. So you will have lowered immune function. There's study after study that shows all this. I'll share some links with you below. It regulates mood. So if it's shutting down the process that deals with mood, you're going to experience more anxiety and depression. If it's shutting off your appetite, you're going to have digestive problems. And again, sleep. No one tries to sleep during fight or flight. If cortisol remains high, you're going to have sleep problems. And one that I read about as well, any of you who are really into health, is that one of the things it does during the cortisol release, it actually takes calcium from your bones and puts it into your system because calcium is necessary in that environment. So you're going to have reduced bone density. So cortisol and trading, let's talk about that because we just went through all the things cortisol does. Patrick, are any of those helpful to a trader in a trade?
No, and I'm having PTSD now from back when I was trading intraday and trading from midnight to 6 in the morning. Because, that's when the market was active. So I figured that's when I have to be there. That's just, look, this is part of my job, just like waiting tables is. So after I'd wait tables and have all that stress, come home, start the new stress cycle, and encounter these things not only throughout the night, because I was trying to trade a bunch of different pairs too, because you know how it is. Sometimes there's just no trades going on if you're trading intraday. So if you have other pairs open, then the chance of actually being active and having trades on goes up. So even if I was trading the 15-minute or 30-minute chart, and I only had to be there when those candles were closing, I still had a lot of different currency pairs open. So I was constantly doing things, and then you would always have that 5:30 a.m. Pacific time USD news, and I didn't shut down all my trades before I went to sleep because it didn't make sense to. It wasn't time to do that yet. So I would have open trades as there was price action still happening from the news event that happened 30 minutes before I was supposed to go to sleep. So I would go to sleep in a state of God knows what. And that's no way to do anything. I mean, even trying to go to sleep after my body was so tired from everything I'd been doing all day, it just wasn't working. Everything you just talked about, irritability, sleep problems, digestive problems, I was the worst person to be around at work, all of those things. I thought it was just due to the workload I was putting on myself, but it could have been a lot of these things too. Because, I'm sure there were chemicals going through my body and brain at a heightened level that weren't there before because of this route I chose to take. So, it's all coming back to me here.
I totally understand that. And here is the thing I'm going to say is fairly controversial. A lot of people don't like to admit this because it really takes away from our concept of free will. Who you are at the moment is the culmination of what's going on in your body, both in your mind. I know we think we control our bodies with our thoughts, but really our hormones control our thoughts. Everyone thinks, I'm just going to think to be a nice person today. Well, if you have all these experiences that cause all this trauma and you have all these hormones surging in your body, you don't want to be a nice person. it's not who you are. You aren't in control. You're not in the driver's seat of your personality anymore. You have all these chemicals. And a lot of people hate that when I bring that up to them, because that really negates this free will. Hey, I can choose to be nice to people. Guess what? Sometimes you literally can't choose to be nice to people. But that's a very difficult concept for people to think, because we always think that we are in control. So there's no question that your trading activity and everything you were doing in your life contributed to all of those things. Here's the great thing. You change those things up, you make some changes, and all of a sudden those chemicals go away, and all of a sudden you can be the person that you actually want to be. And that's what I really want to talk about in this episode, because in the world of trading, we are going to have these chemicals swirling around in our brains. But if we can reduce them and control them and isolate them, we have a much better chance of being the people we want to be. So just like last week when we talked about adrenaline, and we said adrenaline has no place in trading. Well, guess what? Cortisol has no place in trading. They are released together. When you trigger that fight or flight response, it is released. Here's the difference. Adrenaline, after about 80 to 120 minutes, is about the most adrenaline that you can handle. And after that, the body becomes exhausted. The adrenaline levels come down, and you no longer can hold up that level. We talked about last week how you actually go below your baseline in adrenaline. You go below that point. Cortisol doesn't work that way. Cortisol can stay elevated. So just think about that in trading. We get this adrenaline rush. We get the fight or flight response. We're in a situation. We get this burst. 90 minutes later, that burst of positive energy is gone, but the negative energy is still there. That's why it will have no place in trading. There's no real benefit to having this cortisol in your system. So let's talk about how to control this. Understand it's going to happen when you trigger the fight or flight response. Now, in the last episode, we talked about not triggering that fight or flight response. How do we do that? We talked about a couple things. We talked about reframing your goals, not about money, not about profits, but about the system. So if you can make it to where it's all about the system, it's all about following the system. Whether or not your trade won or lost, made money, is doing well, is not doing well, none of that triggers that fight or flight response, because you are so focused in on following the system that is where the reward is attached to. So that's going to be the first thing, is to focus on your system. That's going to avoid a lot of the issues. The other thing we talked about in the last episode is binary situations. Now, again, a binary situation is fight or flight. You're in a trade. It's working for you or it's working against you. I don't care, whichever one. And you now are faced with the decision. Do I stay in the position and risk losing this profit, or do I hold this position because I think there's more profit in it? That binary situation that you've placed yourself in is very dangerous, because those are going to trigger those responses. And last episode, we talked about avoiding those situations. We talked about scaling in, scaling out. We talked about following a trading plan. We've talked about making sure your position sizing was proper. Patrick, is there anything you want to go over in this episode as far as how to avoid those binary situations?
Well, all I could really think about this whole time was what's triggering this in the first place, and that was, especially back in the day, me looking at the screen. Screen watching, if you're into it, if you really love this game, it's must-see TV. It's the most exciting thing on right now. There's nothing else I'd rather be looking at, when you're in the soup like this. But all the same, that I'm thinking, what is the one thing that's responsible for triggering all these chemicals? That's it. Me watching price go up and down at the rate they go up and down. So I keep thinking, if you just get rid of that, if you get rid of the cause, you also get rid of the effect too. I don't know how much you can speak to that.
Absolutely. And I've heard you talk with your traders about only checking the market once a day. Here's a great thing. If you don't see it happening, you have no binary response to it. So I love what you talk about, checking once a day, not watching the screen, stuff like that.
Yeah, getting rid of your phone apps, so you don't even have the opportunity to do it when you want to, because you're going to want to. Yeah, we touched on this last week, but it bears repeating, I think, because I think especially for everybody who's starting out, we just think that's what you do. You look at the screen for a long time and you react to it when it's time to. It doesn't have to be that way, and it probably shouldn't be that way. But then again, Rob, we have a lot of intraday traders who listen to this podcast. So they have to be in front of the screen more than a daily chart trader would have to be. So how do your intraday traders counterbalance this? There's got to be a way.
That's very easy. Every trade should always be 100% pre-planned. Here's my entry. Here's my exit if I'm wrong. Here's my entry if I'm right. This is how I'm going to manage the position. Everything should be completely predetermined in every single trade. The worst thing you could do is get in a trade and see what happens. That is not trading. That's gambling. Go down to Vegas and gamble all you want. In trading, it's predetermined. So really, there should be nothing on that screen that really changes your mind. And the fact that you're watching the screen, now you're going to be really tempted to change your mind. Watching a screen is very detrimental to trading. But I'm also a realist. I love screen watching. I've been doing it for 25 years, but over the years, I've started to recognize it for what it was. And Patrick, you said it best. Must-see TV. It's entertainment. It's entertainment. You should be able to watch your trade just like you watch a movie on Netflix. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh man, I didn't see that one coming. Oh no, they died. Like, that's how you should respond to it. It's simply entertainment. If you do not want to engage in screen watching, but if you find yourself unable to not be a screen watcher, you need to compartmentalize it in your mind and say, look, I'm just watching this because I love it. This is just entertainment. All of a sudden, again, trying to reduce those binary decisions that you have to make. There's no decision that you need to make when you're watching a Netflix movie. You just get to sit back and enjoy it. So if you can't refrain from screen watching, reframe it as entertainment. That's how you have to do it.
So yeah, so you might be, experienced traders might be sitting there thinking, okay, so the solution to all of this is just do what Rob and I have been telling you to do this entire time. Trade your system. Don't worry about anything else. Okay, yeah, those are all solutions, but that doesn't mean that these chemicals that are getting in everybody's way aren't still going to happen naturally. Well, there's actually ways, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, where we can lessen not only the effect of these chemicals, but the frequency at which they occur in the first place, which I think would be extraordinarily helpful.
Yeah, in the next episode, that's literally all we're talking about. We've been talking about limiting stimulus, and that's really the first fight in this, is to limit the stimulus that's going to cause these chemicals to spike. However, these chemicals are natural, they're normal, they're going to be there. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about how to manage these chemicals long-term over the period of your life. There are things you can do to bring all these chemicals into balance to where you're able to use your prefrontal cortex in times of decision.
All right, good, because I got a lot of questions. So we will answer those next week, traders. But thank you for joining us here at episode 31 in the middle of our brain chemistry series. We will wrap it up next week with a lot of answers to questions and a lot of solutions as well. So for episode 31, this has been VP and Rob Reinhold. Thank you for joining us.
Goodbye, everybody.